Hi VC, Dave back with you. I've been absolutely ages meaning to do a follow-up video. It's a couple of months since my last video. Yeah, last time I was showing you that amazing VCLT which Jimmy Earl Of Suaves sent, and he also sent some VCLT to Ben Costello. Actually, so myself and Ben actually ended up swapping some VCLT. I think some of the stuff that he sent to Ben, he meant to give to me, and vice versa. So we ended up doing a swap of Jimmy's VCLT. So I actually ended up, yeah. So this is something that was long on my want list. Placebo, self-titled, Placebo, a Belgian fusion outfit, led by Martin Mullane. This originally came out in 1971. This is Ball of Eyes, and this is a fairly recent Record Store Day reissue. Ben already had this, so I ended up with this. So thanks both to Ben and to the Earl. Really delighted to have this. Yeah, this great cover of Inner City Blues by Marvin Gaye on this. And that's not the only placebo related item. The follow-up album, Placebo 1973, which personally I prefer this album, but again, this is this is another Music on Vinyl Record Store Day release. Yeah, some fantastic electronic influence tracks on this. Both of those albums were something that I had been on my want list for a long time, and again, something which Ben already had. So yeah, so Charles Mingus, The Black Saint and The Sinner Lady, on Impulse. Yeah, what can I say? Absolutely fantastic condition. I'm not 100% sure which pressing this is. I think it's a fairly early enough pressing. Yeah, this is. Oh yes, and it does have the original inner bag as well. As you can see, yeah. So I think this is certainly an early pressing anyway. And that sorry, put that back in. Yeah, this is classic, one which I'm sure most of you are familiar with already, so I won't go into it too much. Yeah, so really happy to get my hands on that. Yeah, so there's two more. Jazz and Samba by Milt Jackson, which is again another Impulse release. And Benson and Farrell, and this is on the CTI label, the one that had Bob James among others. So yeah, this is an interesting one. One that I wasn't familiar with previously, and yeah, as it says, yeah, there's flute player, flute and guitar. So George Benson, we're all familiar with him, and Joe Farrell, So yeah, so that's the remainder of the VCLT from uh, the Earl of Suaves, Jimmy, courtesy of Ben Costello, whom I gave some of the stuff that arrived in my package to. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that I've been meaning to show for ages. I'm going to do a follow-up video as well, because I found loads of great stuff in charity shop stroke thrift shops recently, but I'm going to do a separate video on those. And these are all kind of everything here is either stuff I've picked up at record show fairs, or secondhand, or new, or anyway. This is something I picked up late last year. I've been meaning to show this for ages. Yeah, I think this came out at the end of last year. Aphex Twin Collapse EP. On the Warp label, Aphex Twin. Yeah, big fan. Yeah, seminal figure in electronic music from the early 90s onwards. This is kind of a return to form for him, really. This EP on the Warp label. Tracks are on this. Yeah, 4 tracks. Yeah, it's kind of a kind of a return to the classic sound, really. Aphex Twin. Okay, these are 2 long-term want list items which I picked up on Discogs. 2 albums which I didn't have in my collection. I was able to get these because I sold something, so I had the money to Wire. This is their second album, Chairs Missing. This came out in '78 originally, but this is a UK pressing from, I'm not sure when exactly this came out, but it's from the 80s anyway. It's the Black Harvest label. Yeah, I got this for, yeah, it's the inner sleeve as well. Got this for a really decent price. Yeah, Wire, I mean the originals of these records go for astronomical money. Generally, even reissues aren't too cheap. Yeah, I got these for €15 each, which is pretty decent. Yeah, this is an album which, Wire, they were there kind of at the beginning of punk rock, but really, they were just kind of moved well beyond the confines of punk, and one of the seminal kind of post-punk acts. The strong shades on this I thought of Pink Floyd, it's particularly early kind of Syd Barrett Pink Floyd on a couple of tracks. It's kind of there in the background, but it's not kind of overt. But yeah, this is their follow-up to Pink Flag, which came out in '77. So from the same seller, I picked up their third album, 154, from which came out in '79. This is a Dutch pressing. Again, it's a reissue, probably from the 80s, on EMI. I don't know of the exact years of reissue, but yeah, this one again saw them going down a more experimental route, and that will lead me on to Record Store Day. Record Store Day, I didn't get any Record Store Day releases, but I did. My local independent record store did have a 25% off sale, So I did get 2 long-term want list items. One, this is related to Wire because this was Gilbert and Lewis from Wire. This they recorded under the. This was their follow-up to Wire after Wire broke up, I think 1980 or 81. Dome, their first self-titled album they released under that Dome name. This is a brand new reissue actually from. Well, it's not brand new. It's what, 2011. Fairly quite recent, anyway. Is this? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It goes off in a far more experimental direction than what they'd done with Wire, so it's kind of a natural progression. Their work in Wire had been, you know, becoming more experimental and kind of alienated a lot of the punk rock fraternity who had been following them. But this went off even more just out there direction. So they released quite I'm not sure how many albums they released under the Dome title, but this is the debut from 1980, and this is a reissue from 2011, I think. Also, as part of that 25% off sale, I grabbed this album, which again had been on my want list for a long time. The Fall, This Nation's Saving Grace. Yeah, for all of you familiar with The Fall, Marquis Smith, who actually passed away last year, I think I don't know how many, over 30, maybe possibly 40 albums. Yeah, there's a seminal Manchester act. This is probably one of their more accessible albums. I think it's one that probably non-Fall fanatics cite as one of their favourites, and it is an excellent album. It's extremely catchy, kind of hooky. I think Brick Smith, his wife of the time, I think her influence is quite strongly apparent on this album. So yeah, this came out in 1985, and this is quite recent reissue, yeah, 2014. So I tried to get through this pretty quickly because I don't want the. There's quite a bit of stuff to show here. Now this again, another album. There's another connection here with Wire and the Dome, because this came out on the Dome. This was an album which was released on the Dome label back in 1982, and there's quite an interesting story behind this album and this artist. This was the sole release by a guy called Michael O'Shea. He was an Irish experimental. Well, technically he was a busker, but he had this instrument, a home-built instrument called Mokara, which was a kind of something kind of a cross between a harp and a synthesizer. Very enigmatic character. Like Gilbert and Lewis, basically there's a kind of story is they just randomly came across him busking on the street and asked him. They were so impressed by the music he was creating that they asked him to record an album, and he did. A full year later, he just randomly turned up in the studios and said, "Right, let's do it." And this album was released in 1982. The originals of this are insanely expensive, very, very rare. But this is a recent reissue. Actually, it only came out last year. Funnily enough, it's on a label called Archival. And again, another weird kind of a coincidence. It was put out by the Magpie. Yeah, the guy I've referred to as the Magpie. myself and Ben, we know this guy. We collectively refer to him as the Magpie. But yes, we have him to thank for reissuing this long lost. It is a long lost classic. Very hard to describe. It's entirely instrumental. Very kind of ethereal, dreamlike. It really is a kind of a one in a kind of a million, because there's the sound that this guy creates is just totally unique. Sadly, I don't think he recorded very little else after that, and he died. He was actually killed in the early 90s when he was knocked down by a bus. But a very unusual character. Michael O'Shea, self-titled album. A couple of record fairs recently. Didn't pick up much. This is an interesting modern classical album. Piano music from Celestial Harmonies at Keys of Life. It's called Celestial Harmonies, a German label. This is a compilation which came out in the mid-80s, 1986 I think, and it features some, there's an interesting lineup here. Florian Frick of Popol Vuh, Hans Orte, Terry Riley as well. It's entirely solo piano. Some of them play their own compositions, and some of them play Cyril Little. Cyril Little playing a piece by Alexander Serabin. So I picked this up really cheaply as well. Keys of Life, piano music from Celestial Harmonies, that's called. Pardon me if I'm rushing through this, but yes, this is an album that I've been looking for a long time. The Eurythmics, not a band whom I generally collect, but this is the one and only album by them that I've been looking for. It is their debut album. It's called In the Garden. It came out in 1981. This is totally different to anything. You're all familiar with Eurythmics. They were a huge band in the 80s. This is very, very different to what came after. This was recorded in Connie Plank's studio, produced of course by Connie Plank, and this features there's quite a krautrock influence on this album, because Holger Zuke of Cannes features on this. Jackie Liebsbit, also of Cannes, Cannes drummer. What's his name? Oh damn! Just trying to find his name here. Sorry. So it's kind of quite punk.